The Hard Thing About Hard Things, by Ben Horowitz. Introduction. Imagine you're 29 years old. You've poured every ounce of your soul into your job. You're working for one of the hottest companies in the world, a place called Netscape, and your team has just pulled off a miracle, building a business from nothing to over $400 million a year. But there's a problem. Your co-founder, a 22-year-old prodigy who just appeared on the cover of Time magazine sitting barefoot on a throne, has just publicly revealed your entire secret strategy 2 weeks before the official launch. You're livid. You fire off a short, sharp email to him. You write, "I guess we're not going to wait until the 5th to launch the strategy." And then, 15 minutes later, a reply hits your inbox. It's from him. But he's also copied the CEO and the chairman of the board. And the email reads, "Apparently you do not understand how serious the situation is. We are getting killed out there. As a result, we've lost over $3 billion in market capitalization. We are now in danger of losing the entire company and it's all your fault. Next time do the fucking interview yourself. Fuck you, Mark." You go home that night, your heart pounding. You have a wife and 3 young children to support. You show the email and the magazine cover to your wife. She looks at you with worried eyes and says, "You need to start looking for a job. Right away." What do you do in that moment, when your dream job turns into a nightmare, when the person you look up to throws you under the bus in front of everyone who matters? Most business books give you recipes for success. They tell you how to set big goals, how to hire great people, how to build a perfect plan. But what happens when you miss the goal? What happens when those great people become entitled? What happens when the plan falls apart and you're staring into the abyss? That is the world of Ben Horowitz's masterpiece, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. This isn't a book about ideals, it's a book about reality. It's a story forged in the fires of near bankruptcy, gut-wrenching layoffs, and impossible decisions. Ben Horowitz, the man who received that email, went on to become one of the most respected and successful entrepreneurs and investors in Silicon Valley. Today, we're not just going to summarize his book. We're going to walk through his story, from the dizzying heights of the dot-com boom to the crushing depths of the bust, and discover the brutal, unglamorous, and often terrifying lessons he learned along the way. By the end of our journey, you will understand the one skill that separates the great leaders from the rest, the ability to make the best move when there are no good moves. You'll learn why embracing what he calls the struggle is the only true path to greatness. This isn't just about business, it's about navigating the messy, complicated, and hard parts of life. Book summary. Our story begins in a time that feels like a myth now, the late 1990s. The internet was a rocket ship, and Silicon Valley was the launch pad. Money was flowing like water, and it felt like anyone with a decent idea could become a millionaire overnight. This was the world that gave birth to LoudCloud. Ben Horowitz, along with his famous co-founder from Netscape, Mark Andreessen, and 2 other brilliant minds, Tim Howes and In-Sik Rhee, had an idea that was ahead of its time. They saw that companies were struggling to build websites and applications that could handle millions of users. It was incredibly complex. So they thought, what if we built a computing cloud that handled all that complexity for them? The term cloud as we know it today was largely born from their company, LoudCloud. Coming off the legendary success of Netscape, raising money was easy. Their first venture capital investor, a gentleman named Andy Rachleff, gave Ben a piece of advice that defined the era. He said, "Ben, think about how you might run the business if capital were free." It was a dangerous question. It's like asking someone, what would you eat if ice cream had the same nutritional value as broccoli? And Ben ran with it. LoudCloud hired hundreds of the smartest people in Silicon Valley in just a few months. They built a massive infrastructure, signed up customers at a breakneck pace, and were featured on the cover of Wired magazine. They were building, it seemed, the greatest business of all time. And then, in March of 2000, the music stopped. The great dot-com crash began. The Nasdaq, which had doubled in a single year, collapsed, wiping out nearly 80% of its value. Companies that were once celebrated as the future were now called dot bombs and went out of business almost overnight. Suddenly, LoudCloud, with its hundreds of employees and massive expenses, was in a desperate race for survival. Most of their customers were other dot-coms, and they were going bankrupt at an alarming rate. They needed to raise more money, but the world had changed. Investors were terrified. Ben pitched his company to one firm, and his friend and board member, the legendary coach Bill Campbell, later called him with some feedback. "Ben," Bill said in his raspy voice, "well, honestly, they thought you were smoking crack." This is where the real story begins. This is where Ben Horowitz entered what he calls the struggle. The struggle, as he describes it, is not a single event. It's a state of being. The struggle is when you wonder why you started the company in the first place. It's when food loses its taste. It's when you're surrounded by people, but you feel completely alone. The struggle, he says, is when self-doubt becomes self-hatred. It's where your guts boil so much you feel like you're going to spit blood. Every great entrepreneur, from Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg, has been through it. But as Ben warns, that doesn't mean you'll make it. The struggle has no mercy. The struggle is where greatness comes from. With no private investors willing to touch them, LoudCloud was left with one, single, terrifying option: to go public. In the middle of the worst stock market crash for technology companies in history. Ben made a list of all the reasons it was a terrible idea. Our sales were hard to forecast. Our customers were going bankrupt. We were losing a ton of money. We were, in his own words, not ready to be public. He presented this to his board. After a long, awkward silence, Bill Campbell broke the tension. "Ben," he said, "it's not the money." A wave of relief washed over Ben. Maybe there was another way. Then Bill spoke again. "It's the fucking money." They were going public. What followed was what one magazine called the IPO from hell. The press tore them apart. A Wall Street Journal cover story quoted a money manager saying, "Wow, they were desperate." Just before the IPO roadshow, where they would pitch the company to big investors, Ben had to hold an all-company meeting. He delivered two pieces of news. First, they were trying to go public. Second, because the company's value had fallen so far, they had to do a reverse stock split, which effectively cut the number of shares each employee had in half. He had just cut their dreams in half. The employees were infuriated. His own mother-in-law, who was at the meeting, turned to his wife and asked, "Why does everybody hate Ben so much?" The roadshow was brutal. The market crashed daily. Investors looked like they had just come out of torture chambers. Ben didn't sleep for more than 2 hours total during the entire 3-week trip. Then, in the middle of it all, he got a call from his father-in-law. His wife, Felicia, had suffered a severe allergic reaction to medication and had stopped breathing. "She is not going to die," his father-in-law assured him, but Ben was stunned. He had been so focused on saving the company that he had lost sight of the only thing that truly mattered. He called Felicia. "If you need me," he said, "I will come home." Her response was unwavering. "No. Get the IPO done. There is no tomorrow for you in the company." "I'll be fine." He stumbled through the rest of the roadshow in a daze. On the day before the offering, Yahoo, the biggest star of the internet boom, announced its CEO was stepping down. It felt like the end of the world. They managed to sell the stock at $6 a share, far below their initial hopes, and raise the money they needed to survive. But there was no celebration. The investment banks didn't even offer them the traditional closing dinner. On the plane ride home, his director of finance said, "Yeah, we did it. But we're still fucked." He was right. Surviving the IPO wasn't the end of the struggle, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. This experience taught Ben one of his most profound lessons. The most difficult skill for a CEO is not strategy, or finance, or marketing. It's managing your own psychology. The pressure is immense. You're responsible for other people's money, for your employees' livelihoods. Things are constantly going wrong, and as the CEO, it is always your fault. If a great engineer quits, that's your fault. If the product has too many bugs, that's your fault. If you miss the quarterly target, that's your fault. As he puts it, if you're a CEO, getting a 22 out of 100 on the test is a normal day. For a straight A student, that feeling can be crushing. Faced with this, CEOs often make one of two mistakes. Either they take everything too personally and end up terrorizing their team, or they don't take things personally enough, becoming Pollyanna-ish and ignoring real problems. The secret, Ben learned, is to be urgent but not insane. To separate the importance of the issue from how you feel about it. It's a lonely job. You can't share your deepest fears with your employees, because it would panic them. And you can't always get useful advice from your board, because the knowledge gap between you and them is just too vast. You are all alone. So how do you cope? Ben offers a few techniques. First, make friends with other CEOs. People who have been through similar battles. You don't need them to solve your problem, but just talking to someone who understands can be a lifeline. Second, get it out of your head and onto paper. Writing down your logic separates you from the emotion and allows for clarity. And third, and perhaps most importantly, focus on the road, not the wall. When you're driving a race car at 200 miles per hour, if you stare at the wall, you will drive right into it. If you focus on the road, you will follow the road. As a CEO, there are 1,000 things that can go wrong. If you obsess over them, you will crash the company. Focus on where you are going, not what you hope to avoid. And above all, he says, the great CEOs all have one thing in common. When asked how they did it, they all say the same thing: I didn't quit. This refusal to quit, this embrace of the struggle, forced Ben Horowitz to evolve. He had been a peacetime CEO for about 3 days before the dot-com crash plunged him into an 8-year war. This distinction, he realized, was critical. Peacetime, he explains, is when your company has a big lead over the competition and a growing market. In peacetime, you can focus on creativity and expansion. Google's 20% time, where employees could work on their own projects, was a classic peacetime policy. Wartime is when you are fighting for survival against an existential threat, a brutal competitor, a market collapse, a technology shift. In wartime, the mission is everything. There is no room for deviation. Survival depends on precision and strict alignment. The peacetime CEO works to minimize conflict. The wartime CEO heightens the contradictions to force clarity. The peacetime CEO strives for broad buy-in. The wartime CEO neither indulges consensus building nor tolerates disagreements. The peacetime CEO has a contingency plan. The wartime CEO knows that sometimes, you just have to roll a hard 6. Ben had to become a wartime CEO. After the IPO, LoudCloud's business was still in deep trouble. The market was getting worse, not better. One day, their largest competitor, a company called Exodus that had been valued at $50 billion just a year earlier, filed for bankruptcy. It was a terrifying sign. If they could fail, anyone could. Ben knew he needed a plan B. He started a secret project inside the company, codenamed Oxide. The idea was to take the powerful software they had built to run their own cloud service, Opsware, and turn it into a product they could sell to other companies. It was a desperate move. When two of his business school-educated employees found out, they presented him with a 45-slide deck on why it was a stupid, misguided idea that would drain resources from their core business. He listened to their entire presentation without saying a word. When they finished, he looked at them and said, "Did I ask for this presentation?" This, he says, was the moment he transitioned from a peacetime CEO to a wartime CEO. He knew the company was in deep, deep trouble. He needed data and information, but he didn't need recommendations from people who didn't have the full, terrifying picture. The company would live or die by the quality of his decisions. Then came the final blow. Their largest customer, Entreessen, which accounted for more than $1 million a month in guaranteed revenue, went bankrupt. They couldn't pay the $25 million they owed LoudCloud. The company was doomed. There was no way to raise more money. The only path forward was to execute the secret plan, sell the entire LoudCloud services business and pivot the company to become a software company called Opsware. This was an almost impossibly hard thing to do. It meant selling all their customers, all their revenue, and laying off a huge portion of their workforce. It was a bet the company move born of utter desperation. He and his dealmaker, John O'Farrell, worked in secret to find a buyer. They created a bidding war between two giants, IBM and EDS. To create urgency, Ben took a piece of advice from his board member Michael Ovitz, the legendary Hollywood agent. Ovitz told him, "I believe in artificial deadlines. I believe in playing one against the other. I believe in doing everything and anything short of illegal or immoral to get the damn deal done." The artificial deadline worked. They struck a deal to sell the services business to EDS for $63.5 million in cash. They would retain the Opsware software and become a pure software company. It was a miracle. They had avoided bankruptcy. Ben called Bill Campbell to tell him the good news. The deal was done. Campbell's response was immediate and sharp. He told Ben he couldn't go to New York for the big announcement. "You need to stay home," he said, "and make sure everybody knows where they stand. You can't wait a day. In fact, you can't wait a minute. They need to know whether they are working for you, EDS, or looking for a fucking job." It was a painful but essential piece of advice. This leads to another of Horowitz's core lessons: how to do the hard things with humanity. Layoffs are one of the most brutal parts of business, and he learned how to do them the right way. The key, he says, is to get your own head right. It's easy to feel like a failure, to internalize the pain. He remembers an employee writing, "Ben is either lying or stupid or both," and in that moment, he thought, definitely stupid, but you have to focus on the future. He learned to train his managers relentlessly for this terrible task. The golden rule: managers must lay off their own people. You cannot pass the buck to HR. People will remember the day you laid them off for the rest of their lives. If they worked hard for you, you owe them the courage to deliver the news yourself. The message, he learned from Bill Campbell, is for the people who are staying. They will watch how you treat their departing friends, and their trust in you will be won or lost in that moment. You have to be present. Don't hide in your office. Walk the floor. Talk to people. Help them carry their boxes to their cars. Let them know you appreciate them. This same principle of direct, honest, and humane leadership applies to other hard things, like demoting a loyal friend. When the company outgrows an early, loyal employee, it's a heart-wrenching decision. Ben says you must be brutally honest. Don't sugarcoat it. Acknowledge their contributions. Admit your own shortcomings, Perhaps a more experienced CEO could have developed them faster. If you can, couple the demotion with a raise to show they are still valued. You can't let them keep their old job, but as Bill Campbell taught him, you can absolutely let them keep their respect. Dishonesty became a cornerstone of his leadership style. Early in his career, he made the mistake of being too positive, of trying to shield his employees from bad news. He thought he was boosting morale. But one day he was talking to his brother-in-law, a telephone lineman for a taunt, and asked him if he knew a senior executive named Fred. His brother-in-law replied, "Yeah, I know Fred. He comes by about once a quarter to blow a little sunshine up my ass." In that moment, Ben realized his mistake. His team knew things weren't perfect. By only accentuating the positive, he wasn't inspiring them. He was insulting their intelligence and eroding their trust. He learned that trust is the foundation of all communication. As he puts it, in any human interaction, the required amount of communication is inversely proportional to the level of trust. If I trust you completely, I need no explanation. If I don't trust you, no amount of explaining will convince me. By telling it like it is, you build trust. You also get more brains working on the hard problems. A brain can't solve a problem it doesn't know about. After selling the LoudCloud business, the company, now renamed Opsware, was reborn. But it was far from safe. The stock price plummeted to just 35 cents a share. Investors thought they had sold the only valuable part of the company and were now just a shell waiting to burn through its cash. He got a notice from NASDAQ, get the stock price above $1 or be delisted. Once again, Ben was in wartime. He hit the road, not to see traditional investors, but on the advice of a friend, he went to see a legendary, old-school investment banker named Herb Allen. Ben and Mark told him their story. They had a great team, cash in the bank, and a $20 million a year contract from EDS. They were worth more than half their cash. Herb listened, and said simply, "I'd like to be helpful." Over the next few months, Herb Allen and his clients bought up Opsware stock, driving the price from 35 cents to over $3 a share. They were saved. Years later, Ben asked Herb why he invested when no one else would. Herb replied, "I didn't understand anything about your business. What I saw was two guys come visit me when every other public company's CEO and chairman was hiding under their desk. Investing in courage and determination was an easy decision for me." Courage is a theme that runs through the entire book. Ben believes it's the most critical trait for a leader, far more than intelligence. The right decision is often obvious, but the pressure to make the easy, popular, wrong decision can be overwhelming. Courage, he says, like a muscle, can be developed. Every time you make the hard, correct decision, you become a bit more courageous. Every time you make the easy, wrong decision, you become a bit more cowardly. And as CEO, those choices define the character of your entire company. Opsware's war was not over. Their biggest customer, EDS, who accounted for 90% of their revenue, was ready to cancel their contract. The deployment was a mess. One EDS executive, a tough guy from Oklahoma, screamed at Ben's team, "I think Opsware is the biggest goddamn piece of shit. I'm going to do everything I can to get you guys thrown out of here." Ben's team managed to negotiate a 60-day window to fix everything. 60 days to live. Ben told his team, "This is not a scenario where an excuse will do. This is a must-win. Our only option is to win." They worked around the clock, but they also needed something more. Ben's sales lead, Anthony Wright, discovered that the EDS executive loved a piece of software from a small company called Tangram, but his own purchasing department was about to take it away from him. Ben had an idea. He looked up Tangram. It was a public company, but it was only worth $6 million. In a lightning-fast, secret move, Opsware bought Tangram for $10 million. He then called the EDS executive and told him that the Tangram software was now his, for free, as part of his Opsware contract. The executive was ecstatic. Suddenly, all the hard work his team had done looked completely different. They had saved the account. They had saved the company. This is what Ben means when he says the first rule of entrepreneurship is that there are no rules. When faced with a crisis, you can't just follow a playbook. Sometimes you have to do something crazy, something no one expects. You have to find a move when there are no moves. The final battle came from a new, aggressive competitor called Blade Logic. They were starting to beat Opsware in key deals. The product was losing. The stock price was falling. The team was exhausted. Ben felt he had no more speeches, no more rah-rah left in him. He called an all-engineering meeting and leveled with them. "I have some bad news. We are getting our asses kicked by Blade Logic and it's a product problem. If this continues, I'm going to have to sell the company for cheap. We have one bullet left in the gun and we must hit the target." He asked every one of them to go home and tell their families, "Ben needs me for the next 6 months." The team rallied. For 6 months, they worked 7 days a week, morning till night, to rebuild the product. And it worked. They started winning deals again. They went on to become the #1 company in their market. This experience taught Ben that when you're facing an existential threat, there are no silver bullets. There is no clever shortcut. As one of his old engineering partners told him, "We are going to have to use a lot of lead bullets. You have to do the hard, grinding, relentless work to fix the core problem." Finally, after 8 years of struggle, after surviving multiple near-death experiences, Opsware was a success. They were a market leader with a revenue run rate approaching $150 million. Then, offers started coming in to buy the company. The board and the management team, exhausted from the long war, were ready to sell. After a fierce bidding war, Hewlett-Packard offered $1.65 billion in cash. Ben sold the company. But it wasn't a moment of pure joy. He was sick. He couldn't sleep. He cried. How could he sell the thing he had spent 8 years of his life force building? And then he realized it was the smartest thing he'd ever done. They had built something from nothing, saw it go back to nothing, and then rebuilt it into a massive success. His business life, he felt, was kind of over. But he had learned so much. And he realized that most of what he learned wasn't written down anywhere. The world of venture capital was filled with people who had never actually run a company, who had never faced the struggle. And that's when he and Mark Andreessen decided to start a new kind of venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz. A firm built by founders, for founders. A firm designed not to replace the founding CEO, but to help them learn the unnatural, difficult, and crucial skills needed to lead their company through both peacetime and wartime. The ultimate lesson of Ben Horowitz's journey is found in a quote from Karl Marx that was engraved on his communist grandfather's tombstone: "Life is struggle." That, he believes, is the most important lesson in entrepreneurship. Don't run from the hard things. Don't pretend they don't exist. Embrace your weirdness, your background, your instincts. Embrace the struggle. Because it's only in the struggle that you discover who you really are, and what you're truly capable of building. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through the hard thing about hard things, it's worth pausing to think about what makes this book so different, so essential. Most business books are like pristine blueprints for a perfect skyscraper. They show you where every beam should go, how every wire should run, assuming you have perfect weather and flawless materials. Ben Horowitz's book is not a blueprint. It's a field medic's journal, written in the mud and the chaos of the battlefield. It's a book about what to do after the blueprint has been torn to shreds, the foundation has cracked, and the storm of a lifetime is bearing down on you. That's why its central message is so powerful. It's not about avoiding hardship, it's about embracing it. The idea of the struggle is, to me, the heart of the book. It gives a name to that feeling every ambitious person knows, that feeling of being in over your head, of being overwhelmed by the gap between your vision and your reality. By giving it a name, Horowitz normalizes it. He tells you that this feeling isn't a sign that you're failing, it's a sign that you're trying to do something meaningful. For anyone, but especially for someone young and ambitious, this is a liberating idea. It reframes failure and difficulty not as endpoints, but as necessary parts of the journey. The moments of deepest despair are often the moments of greatest learning and, ultimately, greatest strength. Another profound lesson is his distinction between the peacetime CEO and the wartime CEO. This isn't just a clever metaphor, it's a practical framework for leadership. So much of the advice we get in life is peacetime advice. Be collaborative, be open-minded, empower others. And that's great advice when things are good. But Horowitz gives us permission to be different when the stakes are existential. In wartime, leadership requires a different posture, decisive, focused, even ruthless in service of the mission. Understanding which season you're in, peace or war, is a critical leadership skill, whether you're running a company, leading a school project, or just navigating your own life. Finally, the thread of raw, brutal honesty that runs through the book is its most enduring quality. The courage to tell it like it is, to yourself and to others. The courage to have the hard conversations, to make the lonely decisions, to face the truth even when it's terrifying. This isn't just a business tactic, it's a principle for living a life of integrity. So, what can we take away from this and apply today? First, the next time you have to give someone difficult feedback, try Horowitz's approach. Forget the shit sandwich, be authentic. Come from a place of genuinely wanting them to succeed. Be direct, but not mean. Frame it as a dialogue, not a monologue. You might be surprised how much more effective it is. Second, the next time you make a mistake or face a setback, practice what Horowitz learned from the Raiders owner Al Davis: nobody cares. This sounds harsh, but it's incredibly freeing. Spend zero time on excuses or feeling sorry for yourself. Devote all of your energy to what you can do right now to move forward. It's a mindset that shifts you from victim to actor. And third, acknowledge your own struggles. Get them out of your head. Write them down or talk to a trusted friend or mentor. You don't need them to have the answer. The act of sharing the burden, of externalizing the chaos in your mind, is often the first step toward finding clarity. That was a summary of The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. We've journeyed through the core battles and the hard-won wisdom of this incredible book today. But a summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a mountain. The real understanding, the real growth, happens when you climb it yourself. The book is filled with stories, nuances, and moments of raw emotion that we just couldn't capture here. If anything we've talked about today sparks something in you, a recognition of your own struggles or a hunger for real-world wisdom, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience, a mentorship in courage and resilience that can genuinely change how you lead and how you live. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, it would mean the world to me if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Thank you for listening. Let's keep growing together.